They didn't hesitate. No long goodbye, no final conversation, no explanation that made the nights easier. Just silence. Like you were a page they finished reading. Like you were a number they dialed by mistake. Like you were nothing. And maybe that's what hurts the most. Not that they left, but how effortlessly they did it. How your memories were heavy, but theirs seemed light. How the nights you can't sleep are just regular Tuesdays for them. And how somewhere deep inside, you still believe they might come back. But let's stop pretending. Because if someone can walk away from your life as if you never mattered, it's not your job to convince them otherwise. They already showed you who they are. And the pain you're carrying, it's not love anymore. It's the grief of realizing you gave your soul to someone who was only borrowing your light. It's the ache of holding on to something that was only ever meant to pass through. But here's what you need to remember. Just because they walked away like you meant nothing doesn't mean you're nothing. Some people only come to take. They love the version of you that doesn't know better. They love the one who overgives, over-apologizes, and overstays. They don't leave because you're not enough. They leave because eventually you are going to realize you are, and that scares them. So this video isn't about them. It's about the part of you that's still waiting for an answer. The part that keeps refreshing their profile, hoping for a sign. The part that keeps rewriting memories to make their cruelty seem like confusion. It's time to let that part go. Because if you don't remember what they did, how they walked away without flinching, you'll end up chasing ghosts instead of building your life. And the next time someone tries to leave like you're nothing, you'll smile because you finally know better. When someone walks away without warning, without closure, without a trace of the person they once pretended to be, you don't just grieve the loss, you grieve the meaning. You start questioning everything. Every conversation, every smile, every moment that felt real. And that's when the real heartbreak begins. Not from the separation itself, but from the slow unraveling of your memories. Because to admit the truth, to truly face that they walked away like you meant nothing, would require facing a more brutal truth. That they might have never really cared the way you did. So you rewrite it. You start telling yourself lies, not because you're stupid, not because you're weak, but because your heart is trying to survive. They were just confused. They're going through something. If I had just said the right thing, maybe they would have stayed. You protect their image at the expense of your own self-worth. You make excuses for them just to avoid the shame of being discarded like you were disposable. But here's the thing. When someone walks away like that, it reveals more about them than it ever does about you. People who love with depth don't disappear without explanation. People who see your soul don't ghost it like it's nothing but noise. People who are honest don't turn their backs without a single word. Yet still, you cling to what they were in the beginning. You remember the tenderness, the attention, the early fascination, because if you don't, the contrast would be too painful to hold. You remember their eyes when they looked at you like you were the only person in the world. You remember the promises, not because they were real, but because you needed them to be. But this is how we stay stuck. This is how we end up locked in emotional prisons we built ourselves, out of hope, fantasy, and the fear of facing reality. Because here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The version of them you miss doesn't even exist anymore. Maybe it never did. It was a character, a costume, a performance made to win your trust, your affection, your loyalty. And when they were done with what they needed, they vanished. No explanation, no remorse. Because people like that don't offer closure. They offer confusion, and they weaponize it. They know the silence hurts more than the truth. They know if they leave you with unanswered questions, you'll keep replaying the story in your mind, trying to find the flaw in yourself that made them stop loving you. But they didn't stop loving you. They stopped pretending. And the sooner you let that sink in, the sooner you stop blaming yourself for someone else's emotional cowardice. Because this was never about whether you were enough. This was about whether they had the strength to be real, and they didn't. So you need to stop watering the memory of someone who already chose to disappear. Stop begging the past to show up in your future. Stop keeping their name alive in your heart like they earned it. Because some people leave you not because you were lacking, but because they were. And every time you rewrite the story to make them the victim, every time you say they didn't mean it, every time you wonder, what could I have done differently? You reopen the wound they left behind. The truth is brutal. They left because they could, because it was easier, because you loved them enough to let them go without punishment, and they knew it. But the beauty is this. You get to stop now. You get to stop pretending. Stop protecting their reputation in your mind. Stop rewriting your pain into a fairy tale of what if, because healing doesn't come from clarity. It comes from finally being willing to accept the silence as your answer. And that's how the story ends. Not with a goodbye, not with an apology, but with a choice. Your choice to stop letting their exit define your worth. You weren't just grieving them. You were grieving the future you imagined with them, that invisible timeline, the one where you still wake up next to them 5 years from now, the one where things get better, where you understand each other again, where they finally apologize, where the pain all makes sense. But none of that exists. It was never real. It was a dream you built in your head with someone who walked out before the story ever reached its second chapter. And yet, even after they're gone, you stay hooked. Not because of the person, but because of the story. Because humans are addicted to meaning, to reasons, to answers. You want to know why they left. You want to know if they ever loved you. You want to know what you did wrong, but they're not going to tell you. Not because they can't, but because they don't need to. They've already moved on. And the longer you wait for closure, the deeper you bury yourself in a life that no longer includes them. Here's the truth. Closure is a myth. It's the lie we chase to avoid the one thing we fear most, acceptance. Because acceptance means it's really over. It means they're not coming back. It means the version of love you believed in wasn't as strong as you hoped. It means you were just left. And your ego can't handle that. So instead, you hold on. You scroll through old messages. You revisit conversations to read between the lines. You stalk their social media looking for signs. Anything that confirms you still matter, but you don't need signs. You already have your answer. They left. Not slowly, not kindly, not honestly, but completely. And still you sit in that space between fantasy and reality, hoping the story will shift. That maybe the ending was a mistake. That maybe there's a twist coming, some dramatic return that will make all the pain worthwhile. But this isn't a movie, and people don't come back because you waited long enough. They come back when they want something, and sometimes they don't come back at all. So you need to stop living in potential. Stop hoping that one day they'll finally understand what they did. Because even if they did, they wouldn't change it. The truth is, some people don't care how much it hurt you. Some people know exactly what they did, and they still did it. That's not forgetfulness. That's not confusion. That's a choice. And if you keep clinging to a forever that was never promised, you'll keep dragging the pain of yesterday into every tomorrow. Let go, not because it's easy, not because it's fair, but because you deserve a life that isn't anchored to someone who walked away. You deserve mornings without checking your phone. You deserve nights that don't end with, what if? You deserve to be present again. But as long as your heart is rented out to the ghost of someone who left, you'll never fully come home to yourself. Here's what nobody tells you. You don't need closure to move on. You don't need their apology to forgive them. You don't need their return to feel complete. You just need to stop waiting. Waiting keeps you stuck in a story that's already finished. Waiting turns your life into a holding pattern, circling a runway that no one's landing on. And worst of all, waiting makes their silence louder than your worth. So remember this. The version of you that's obsessed with answers, with validation, with the fantasy of what could have been, that version of you isn't broken. They're just afraid. Afraid that if you let go of the dream, all that's left is pain. But that pain won't kill you. In fact, it's the beginning of a life not built on someone else's promises, but your own truth. And your truth is this: you are enough. You are real. You are worthy of a love that doesn't need to be chased. So stop rewriting the ending. Let it be what it was. A goodbye that told you everything you needed to know. You think that if you say the right thing, if you become better, stronger, more lovable, if you finally fix the part of you that wasn't enough, they'll come back. And maybe they will, but not for the reasons you're hoping. They won't come back because they realize your worth. They'll come back because they see you're still trying to earn theirs. And that's not love. That's manipulation disguised as forgiveness. That's power disguised as affection. That's a second chance designed to break you more gently this time. But let's be honest. Chasing someone who left is the fastest way to lose yourself, because every time you try to win them back, you abandon the version of you that deserved to be chosen in the first place, the version that showed up, the version that gave without games, the version that loved honestly and got nothing but silence in return. That version didn't need to be fixed. They needed to be protected. But instead of protecting them, you silenced them. You told them you weren't enough. You told them, if I just change, they'll want me again. You told them, maybe this pain is my fault. And slowly you began negotiating with your own value. You started shrinking your needs, swallowing your voice, tolerating half-love, breadcrumb affection, and emotional confusion, all for a chance to feel chosen again. But being chosen by someone who had to be begged to stay is not a victory, it's a tragedy. And every time you chase that feeling, you're not chasing love. You're chasing familiarity. You're chasing the illusion of control over something that was never yours to begin with. Because real love doesn't require you to become smaller. It doesn't ask you to explain your worth. It doesn't reward your suffering with attention. It sees you. It stays. It chooses you without needing to be convinced. But most people don't wait for that kind of love. They settle for whatever looks like it. They call chaos passion. They call inconsistency mystery. They call pain depth. And so they keep going back. Back to the person who couldn't handle their light. Back to the one who left when things got real. Back to the one who said forever, but meant until it's hard. They go back because they think being wanted is the same thing as being loved. But it's not. Being wanted is about what you can give. Being loved is about who you are. And if someone only comes back when you start becoming who they want, you'll spend your whole life molding yourself to someone else's comfort zone while your soul rots in silence. So stop. Stop trying to become someone they'll regret losing. That version of you doesn't exist, because anyone who truly loved you would never make you prove that you're worthy of staying. Start becoming someone you won't abandon, someone who doesn't beg, someone who doesn't perform, someone who doesn't confuse pain for proof of love. And yes, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt to let go of the hope, to give up the fantasy, to finally say, even if they come back, I'm not letting them in. But that pain is not your enemy. That pain is the sound of your dignity rising from the ashes of your desperation. It's your boundaries rebuilding themselves. It's your soul remembering its own worth. It's the moment you stop auditioning for love that was never qualified to judge you in the first place. And when that day comes, when you no longer feel the urge to text them, to check on them, to prove anything to them, you'll know you're finally free. Not because they stopped mattering, but because you started mattering more. They didn't explain. They didn't apologize. They didn't come back to say, you mattered. And deep down, you've been waiting, not just for a message, but for a moment when all the confusion makes sense, a moment when the pain is finally validated, a moment when they say, I see what I did to you. But that moment isn't coming. And the longer you wait for it, the longer you remain a prisoner in a story they already closed the book on. You have to understand this. Silence is an answer. It's not polite. It's not pretty, but it's clear. They chose not to fight. They chose not to explain. They chose absence over honesty. And that is the loudest truth you'll ever receive. So stop trying to get closure from someone who didn't care enough to give you clarity. Because every time you reopen the wound by checking in, reaching out, wondering if maybe this time is different, you're choosing to bleed for someone who's already healed and moved on. And the most brutal part, they probably don't even think about you anymore. That doesn't mean you weren't real. It doesn't mean the love was fake. It just means they never felt it the way you did. And that has to be enough for you to let go. Because if you keep holding on to what could have been, you will miss what can still be. Every time you remember how they walked away like you meant nothing, don't see it as a curse. See it as the truth that set you free. Because if they had stayed, you would have kept shrinking. You would have kept performing. You would have kept betraying yourself just to feel wanted. You don't want them back. You want the feeling of being chosen, but that feeling isn't theirs to give anymore. It's yours. You choose you now. You stay when others leave. You speak up when they go silent. You love yourself the way they should have. And when the pain comes back, and it will, don't numb it. Let it teach you. Let it teach you how to spot red flags before you call them potential. Let it teach you that someone's ability to disappear says everything about their ability to love. Let it teach you to stop trying to resurrect the dead things you once called love. You don't have to hate them to move on. You don't need revenge. You don't need their suffering. All you need is to remember. Remember the nights you begged for clarity and got silence. Remember the days you waited and they never showed up. Remember how you gave everything and they still walked away. And then, let that memory build you. Let it build a version of you who never forgets what they did. Not to stay bitter, but to stay free. Because if you forget, you'll let someone just like them back in. If you forget, you'll start blaming yourself again. You'll call the manipulation love, the withdrawal space, and the abandonment fate. Don't forget, don't rewrite, don't chase. Remember it all, and then rise from it, not with a heart full of hate, but with a spine made of fire. Because when they walked away like you meant nothing, they made a mistake. They thought you wouldn't remember. You don't need one last conversation. You don't need to be understood. You don't need them to explain why they walked away like you were disposable. What you need is to stop forgetting, Stop forgetting who you were before they made you question your worth. Stop forgetting the red flags you painted white. Stop forgetting the way they disappeared, not once, but every time you needed them most. Because if you forget, you'll let it happen again. You'll fall for another person who claps for your potential but runs from your pain. You'll keep calling loneliness, love, and silence maturity. You'll keep searching for peace in the people who broke you. But peace never comes from understanding someone else. It comes from finally understanding yourself. That you stayed longer than you should have, not because you were weak, but because you loved deeply in a world that rewards detachment. That you begged for answers, not because you lacked pride, but because you still believed people were capable of honesty. That you kept waiting, not because you were delusional, but because no one taught you how to walk away with dignity from someone you still cared about. But now you know. Now you remember. They left like you meant nothing. So don't spend your life trying to prove you did, because the people who are meant for you won't make you wonder. They won't confuse your kindness for weakness. They won't walk away when it's inconvenient. They'll stay. They'll show up, and they'll never make you question whether you matter. So stop rewriting the past. Stop refreshing the thread. Stop hoping their silence will one day turn into clarity. And the next time you feel yourself drifting back to that memory, that message you never got, that explanation you think you need, just whisper this to yourself. They walked away like I meant nothing. I remember, and I choose me now.